Hey everybody, it's Thursday. You know what that means? It's the Art Fight Podcast. I'm Joe Nolan. I'm here with my co-host Brian Siskin. Brian, how are you doing?
Man, I'm great. If you're confused, by the way, if you see like in the around the video, it says that we're gonna have Tom Schoaf with us. We might still, but in this madness of these times, getting schedules aligned sometimes can be a challenge. So if you're confused, or if you came here to see Tom, he might show up, but he might not. But anyway, I'm great, man. How are you?
I'm doing well too. Yeah. We have Tom scheduled. He's been nothing but a gentleman of violence, but a gentleman nonetheless. Also a gentleman on Instagram, and he's been really thoughtful and stuff. And we're hoping that he'll still join us today, but he's got some delays on his end, so we're just going to go ahead and do an episode. And if we can't have Tom on now, we'll get him on, in the next few shows. Brian, this is episode 111. Tomorrow is Friday the 13th. The planets are aligning. Dogs and cats living together. It's a strange time.
Yeah, I feel like I'm not very good at occulting, but I feel like there's got to be a bunch of good stuff in there.
Occulting for dummies.
Yeah. I mean, you have to for any of those kind of things, you have to remember a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? You have to almost like do math. It's a lot. It seems like a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah, they ask a lot of you.
But yeah, so here on my side, it's been all about just continuing to work and do the stuff that I'm doing, and trying to find better ways to do it in terms of art projects, video projects, music work. A lot of new equipment, a lot of new ideas, a lot of new practices, a lot of stripping down of some things, expanding some others. So it's been like a lot of just continual sort of retooling, and I think that probably a lot of people have been doing this for about 8 months now, or whatever it's been. Right. There's a point though where you kind of want to say, like, am I being productive, or is this kind of borderline neuroses, right? Like, I need to make sure that I'm not just allowing myself too much of a rabbit hole. So I've just been solving that lately with getting pretty intense about constraints and repetition, and trying to recognize the power of iteration. And I think that when I get down into the sort of workings of all that in terms of my art practice and my creative practice, I feel like this has got to be, in a certain way, what it's like for a fighter to sort of be thinking about game plan versus instinct, and what can be done through the various tool sets, or whatever. So I don't know. I feel like I'm steeped in the commonality of the creative battles and the fight battles that are of real importance, that our friend Tom Schoaf does, and some others.
Yeah, and I think you were just talking about how you have been sort of setting yourself up to. I know you get up like wee hours of the morning anyway, but you've been getting up in the wee hours of the morning,
old man shit, yeah.
Jumping in your car or walking through your neighborhood and shooting a film, and then editing the film, and then putting some music on the film, and then releasing the film, and then making coffee and starting your day, which is pretty ambitious. But we were just talking now about, the idea of sort of giving yourself the intention of saying, like, I'm going to, make a film every morning. And then also letting yourself have the realistic understanding that you're not actually going to be able to do it every morning, but somehow making enough of a promise that you still get it done 2 or 3 times a week, which is still a massive output of short experimental films.
Right. Well, but it's also been,
I guess I'm talking about balance, I guess. How do you have discipline balanced against unrealistic goals?
Yeah. I think that if you are in the business of getting a lot of iterations done of whatever your work is, in the smallest manageable dose of your work possible, make it as powerful as you can. But I'm sort of challenging myself to make sure that it's kind of like, I want to make sure that I have my hands on all the key pieces of gear and tool sets, cameras and microphones and music gear and various things. Like, I want to make sure that, like, everything's kind of getting touched and used every day in some way. It's kind of like if you were a professional fighter, right? You'd be really needing to make sure that you don't just go train striking for 6 weeks and then kind of come back. Like, so I find it easy when you're in a lot of different mediums and a lot of different ways of working, it's easy to get into wormholes that kind of start to disconnect you from the other stuff. And then you kind of have to work harder to get your way back to sort of a feeling of like, I'm in the zone on this thing. I feel like I've got a relationship with this tool that it works really well for me or whatever, like, I don't feel like it's an alien thing or a barrier to my process. So anyway, so for me, it's been about like, how do I make sure I'm using all of my stuff as much as possible in the lightest weight but powerful dose imaginable. So I've just been making these little short vignettes. And honestly, it's like, I'm talking like I rotate what lenses I'm using. I rotate like it's literally like a sort of a conveyor, like one of those exercise bikes or something of just all my things that I do. And so I treat it like going to the gym. I don't have any expectations. It's not about like performative merit or anything. It's just by the act of doing, but it's accelerated my learning. Like I've been able to problem solve so many things or figure out so many things that I didn't quite understand or didn't, things that were limiting me or whatever. And it's so to get to the roundabout point here, which is basically like not beating yourself up for declaring, I'm going to do this stuff ritually, daily, whatever. And then maybe kind of have some hit and miss days, and not beat yourself up about it, because the reason why it's easy to keep it up though and not let it go is because it is all showing so much back to me so quickly. Like I get so much benefit out of it so fast that it makes it exciting to do, as opposed to feeling like some weird chore that I'm putting myself through.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think I think a lot of times that's that's part of the formula for having realistic goals, is like, is this something that, is going to be like long on the payout? You know what I mean? Because if it's going to be long on the payout, then it's almost like, well, then it's like a marathon and you've got to take it in bite-sized pieces or you're never going to get there, or is this something where you can just like, cash and carry, you know what I mean? And if that's the way, well, that's then there's a different approach to how you can do that. And I think, it just, a lot of this stuff is just really, really important when it comes to actually sustaining your creative practice. Oh, my camera just went all warm again. Now it went cold again. See that? I raised, like I'm like doing magic.
Whoa. It's like your camera has like a Kubrick mode.
That's right. Yeah. So, so it's weird though, I feel like there's a that all this stuff that we're talking about, like the discipline, the sustainable, the realistic goals, all that stuff, that's the difference between people who, it's not the only difference, but it's a big difference between people who actually get projects finished and actually sort of build a creative life over time, versus people who maybe they've got creative intentions or they've got some talents or they've got some ambitions, but it doesn't really get very far, because when it's all said and done, they can't get all that stuff balanced out right so that they can continue to make work regularly, which is what's required.
Yeah. Well, I guess everybody's going to have to, like, the things that just work for them to keep it going. I don't know. I find that a lot of people do just fine sort of really sort of going down a wormhole or being on a particular discipline for a long time, making a lot of work,
for sure,
and then just not doing any of it for 2 years and then coming right back and kind of it's weird, right?
If that actually works for you, where you just like go crazy and then bail and then come back, and like, to me, I feel sort of like you, I believe, where it's like, I try to kind of keep just keep the pot stirring. If I'm going to use this pot again, I have to stir it a little bit every now and then.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be so hard to get this thing going again. It's going to be so much work to do this again. And I almost feel that way a little bit right now about like if I had to go play a gig right now, it wouldn't be that bad, but it would take me a minute to sort of get, an hour's worth of songs under my belt again, confidently, in terms of all my lyrics and chord changes and playing with my guys and all that.
Yeah.
It's going to take it. That's just how it's going to have to be, because we just haven't been able to get together since March. You know what I mean? But I also feel like I've been working enough on music that it's like, I feel like my playing's fine and my singing's fine, and that's good. And, so I've got that muscle's not completely bad right now.
Yeah.
I've been playing some of the older stuff too, but mostly just working on new music. So I've got to sort of relearn shit, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Remember how we did it, you know. That's another thing too, is like once you start playing with a group or whatever, or even just a number of musicians, but once you start presenting things live, they tend to take on, you know, attributes and things that aren't that are you know, that it's
Unexpected.
hard to remember. Yeah, we changed the key on that, or we changed the tempo on that, or we added those bars in the middle so that this guy could do that thing. You know, and it's like, oh yeah,
it's basically like,
you know,
yeah, it's like practicing versus playing a show. It's sort of like, especially after a long time away, it's sort of like there's a trapeze and you've got to clear a certain amount of distance from one to the other. But the longer that you've been away from it, or the rustier that you are, just the further that gulf is.
Yeah.
So it's still doable, but it's like, it's a little hairy sometimes. And yes, things can fall apart. There will always be a net, but you know what? Like, man, it can happen. And, you know, everybody's been through those sort of train wrecks and weirdness. And it's just part of the batterings and beatings of sort of making something what it needs to be.
Yeah. And I just feel like it's one of those, like when it comes to performing music live, it's like, to the degree that I want to be able to do that, I just have to do it relatively regularly, so that it's easier, frankly. If I do it a little bit all the time, it's actually easier than if I try to do it once in a blue moon. You know, that's a lot harder. It's a lot harder.
It really works.
If I just keep it limber, keep it going. And then if there's an opportunity to do more of it, well, then that's easy. You just do more, you know,
amplify what you're already doing.
So it's tough. And I feel like too, with the iteration thing, another thing that's interesting about that to like things I've been doing right now, I've talked a little bit about this, I think, about how I've been like learning a new audio workstation, a new software for recording that's called Ableton Live. Now they actually have a brand new version of it that's coming out now, and I'm kind of like excited, but then I'm also sort of like, fuck, you know, because it's like I just sort of got this thing. Like I feel like I've just got like the horse like going with the moves, you know what I mean? There's still a lot to learn, there's still a long way to go, but I can use it now and it's working, you know, and I can basically, it's functional and I know how to do it. But here's the other thing, is that what it really comes down to is when you're up there working on your recording, you don't want to be functional and getting it done. You actually want all that shit to just be unconscious. You want to be able just to be like click, 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 boom, 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 boom. And then we do this and da, 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 da. Because what you really want to be focusing on and concentrating on is actually creating music. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's one of the things that's tough about it, is that to the degree that you are, you know, using new equipment with new software and trying to make new music, it's all that's fun. And I'm grateful that I've been able to just like take time to actually work on this stuff. But it's also like, and like able to, I mean, they made their software free for the last 180 days or something. So it's like, I didn't even have to spend any money on that shit. Which was really very generous of them. But anyway, with all that said, it's just like, you end up, you know, it's got me feeling like I really want to get this whole thing locked down. I've realized now that I have a hardware problem that's going to take some time out of my whole thing right now. But it's kind of one of those things where it's like, hey, fix it now, bite the bullet, get it taken care of, and then you'll be back up and running even faster, and then everything will work properly. And you'll
without you having divulged what your challenge is that you're talking about.
Okay, yeah.
Can I take a stab or a guess?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to guess. Okay. I get 3 chances. Okay. So my first guess would be that it has something to do with Thunderbolt.
No, it doesn't. But
okay. So,
all right.
All right. Don't, all right. So then it's going to be something to do with latency and audio drivers.
No.
Okay.
No. That's working great.
Okay. And so then my last, let's see, I was closer with my first guess.
Yeah.
So let's see. Oh wait, maybe you have some strange audio artifact or noise that gets in everything through the converters.
No.
Okay. All right.
That would be the worst problem.
Yeah.
The problem I'm having is just a simple problem where my my MIDI controller. Okay, I've got a
Push.
keyboard with lots of knobs and little pads and things on it that I can play lots of music on. Basically, when you're using this, is just for the people who don't understand how this works.
Yeah.
When you're using this kind of software, you've got lots of instruments that are built into the software, and this piece of equipment gives me the actual physical tools to play that music that's in the computer. Okay.
Yeah.
Play those. I got a sample of an organ in the computer, and I've got a keyboard that I can play those sounds on. Okay. Or play that trumpet sound on up and down a keyboard, right?
Which then creates an infinite universe of options and choices.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. So not only that, but this same piece of equipment that allows me to play these virtual instruments also allows me to control the software itself by not having to deal with the computer. I can actually just grab knobs and levels and all sorts of things on the piece of equipment and use those to like push a button and hit record and not have to go to the computer and move a cursor and all this stuff. So it's really kind of important, and it's definitely a piece of equipment that, for the way that I want to work with this stuff, it's makes the whole thing work much better. It's way more intuitive, way more fun. I can actually be playing an instrument. And as a musician, it's way more, I mean, it's necessary. It comes down to it. But even as an engineer, it's more, I would rather actually be able to turn these knobs and do this stuff, because trying to do it on a screen is just, it's first of all, it's just not very exact. It's very difficult in a way. And it's also, just not as satisfying, and I feel like I can't do it as well when I can close my eyes and actually turn knobs. It's like, okay, fuck yeah, that's working. You know what I mean? So anyway, with all that in mind, I basically just have an Akai, MIDI controller that is just almost, it's the kind of equipment which much of this equipment is nowadays, where there's no drivers involved. You just plug it into the computer and it automatically, they recognize each other and you go. Unfortunately, this piece of equipment is having lots of trouble with that very simple connecting. It's very hit and miss, and it's 80% miss in terms of me being able to connect. And I just went through all the trouble, shooting to like check everything with another piece of equipment, and that works every time, and this works almost no times. And it's like, okay, it's this. We went through the trouble of getting another cord, and that didn't, which this dude the guy that I bought it from a company called Sweetwater, which is a really great company with amazing customer service. And this guy's like, I'm going to send you a new cord. I'm going to tell you, I don't think it's the cord, but we can hope it's the cord. And if it
makes you feel better, I will send you a pacifier.
Yeah. He agreed with me that we might as well try the cord.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a pain in the ass to deal with switching out this whole machine, but I need to do it. So I'm looking forward to getting that done so that I can be, get this thing rolling. And Brian and I were talking earlier about some art funding that I'm very close to getting. And if I get that art funding, I will be able to hopefully finish off some things upstairs. I've just got to buy a good desk situation to have this thing set up in a way that's functional and organized. My whole thing's not organized.
Yeah. How many people listening? How many people that are listening to this, whether now or later, are still right now wondering if you're using the right desk or not?
Yeah, is this the right desk? But is this my desk? I just need to verify.
There is no desk nirvana.
Yeah, I have spent months basically sort of researching exactly what kind of desk. It turns out that I just need something very utilitarian, but in specific ways, because I've got a very small attic room that I'm doing all this in. So there's things about it that for instance, if it's on casters, that's going to actually be amazing, because it's going to help me be able to just sort of transform the room at any moment to make it easier to pull the amp out of the corner and and set the mic up in the right spot. So it's going to be rocking. But what it's really going to be is it's going to be lean, mean, and fast. And I'm going to be able to do everything I want to be able to do without having to work at doing it, so that I can instead be working on all these incredible musical ideas that are bursting through my brain. Also, I can't write the lyrics to this one song, and it's driving me insane.
Well, just give yourself permission, man. No. So like on the desk front, though, I will say
I'm in the Kubrick film again. No, I'm not.
Oh yeah.
I said cut, and it changed.
on the desk front, one of the things that I've been able to do in a couple of offices that I've had and where I've needed to quickly create like a creative work kind of space in some other place, and quickly get that going is, like that company Uline, right? Like they have all the shipping and kind of all that sort of stuff, right? It's an office kind of, they have the giant catalogs, right?
Catalog's amazing.
Yeah, I know. It's like a weird, satisfying thing to look through. It's the strangest thing. It caters to some strange part of our DNA or brains or something.
I used to work a lot at this one particular museum, and we'd be hanging out in the office where all the art handler folks were hanging out, and if there was like a brand new Uline magazine, it was like Christmas. We just be like, oh man, look at these heavy duty paper clips, man.
Yeah. I know. It's such a nirvana. It's so amazing. Well, so they have these they're like $300, but you can get their shipping tables, right? So they're heavy duty steel. They're heavy, right? They're no joke, like industrial grade metal. And then you can get, and then the tabletop surface, you can choose whatever wood surface you want. They have like a nicer looking kind of maple, but it's all just like block. And then you can get it with these different modular elements, but they have one where it's like a back piece that kind of comes up and it has conduit for electrical and like everything all in it. And when you get that thing sort of put in and then you get the electrical all dialed into this thing, and it's just like a long, broad shipping table with all this kind of rack storage type of stuff above you, and just somewhere between like an electrical shop and like a desk, like it's perfect. It's really, really cool. And you can get them with casters. And so, like I said, they're heavy. They are like, it's one of those things where I would never say like, put them in the upstairs of your house or something, like trying to get it through stairs or no. Like this thing is, it's heavy.
That whole like shelf rack thing would not, I basically need something that's flat because of the fact that I have these dormer ceilings coming down. I don't have room to have a big screen.
Well, you know what? Like that. Check out the Global Industrial, or the Uline. They're amazing. But anyway, I love it too because you feel like
checking out Uline,
and it's nothing precious. So like if you smash it, you burn it, you scratch, you catch it with a hammer, like whatever you do, it's like whatever, man. It's just, it feels more workmanlike, even though it's actually plenty nice to be like, oh, this is kind of nice,
Yeah. No, that sounds pretty interesting. I also want to talk to you about I'm basically now gathering. So far I've just been getting by with headphones, and that's been fine. And I love like listening on headphones and mixing on headphones, and you have to sing on headphones, of course, and all that. So it's mostly good, but I ultimately want to be able to crank it up and listen. So I got to get some like small monitors as well. So if you have any suggestions for that, like stuff that could just literally go on the corners of the desk, like it could be nothing big, nothing fancy, just the best kind of thing I could get that at that scale. Cause I don't really have room in there to like set up like, monitors on stands, that are
right.
So I can be like right in the sweet spot. And all that. I don't have the room for that. So it's just, just at the desk.
I know this
raised up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to bore the hell out of our audience here with some of these
lot of our audience
deep recommendations, but
who want to know where to get cheap monitors.
This is not even necessarily stuff for everybody's always looking for like the next, like, what do you do? How do you manage your stuff or whatever? So what I have is one of those autonomous desks that's got a motorized sort of riser in it with like a nice maple top or whatever it is. And so it's super easy to put together, and it just comes in a few giant pieces and you just put it together. It's got a little controller on it. You can have presets for different heights for depending on what you're doing. You can make it a standing thing, and you can put a lot of weight on it. I got my speaker monitors, pretty large studio quality speaker enclosures and all that.
Do you have those right on your desk?
Yeah. So I have a I should probably, maybe I can show you with the camera.
What are you using for monitors?
So they're actually M Audio, I want to say like BX5s or something.
Okay.
I have a sweet spot for powered monitors that are not very expensive. Like I have found those to be, like for the longest time I ran these Event 2020Ps, and they were my favorite sounding monitor of all time. They're kind of weird, sort of fetishized little monitors. Now people can't find them and they want to still use them.
Which ones?
They were called Event 2020s. They stopped making them like probably 15 years ago or something, but I had those like in the early days, but I kept them forever.
Audio, what?
I want to say BX5 is what I have. I put some
EX5. Okay, yeah.
my wife gives me endless shit about this, and she just thinks that I'm a
Oh yeah,
lunatic.
those are good, man.
But I can't tell you the model or anything about these speakers that are right in front of me, and the reason why is because I have a thing where I maniacally cover brand logos with black gaff tape on all of everything that I have where it's possible to do it without damaging it. Because I can't, and she just thinks that I'm a crazy person, but I just don't like brand. I don't want to look at a bunch of branded stuff in my purview of like where I'm making art
Yeah.
or whatever. Like, I don't know. I just don't want to feel like I'm drinking Coke and eating a Hershey's or something. It feels like everybody gets real weird with their brand badges being very obscene. So I just tape over everything. So I don't even remember what they are anymore. But yeah, so those monitors are great. I like the challenge of having a cool small space like that, because you really just have to get down to the nitty gritty of like, what do I really need and what's
Right.
really going on here. And they tend to sound a little better. They're gonna be less boomy and, you know.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, one of the best things about it is that like, you know, vaulted ceiling that I've got in the attic. There's one corner in particular that I had to re-record a vocal for that last single that I put out. And I was like, I had just actually gotten my mic that I love, the AT2020, right?
Oh yeah.
Is that what it's called? AT2020? I think that's right. The one it's got like the ports on the side. It's like a bass drum monitor, and I mean bass drum mic, but it's also used a lot in like radio and stuff. Actually, it'd be great for this, but I just used the old trusty 58 and the blue icicle. She never let me down. But that other mic that I'm talking about, the AT2020, is 100% like the first time I sang in that mic, I was just like, what is this mic? Like, I gotta know what this is, because my voice has never sounded this good to me. You know?
Yeah.
And
that's as an aside to anyone who's not like a music geek weirdo. I feel like it's a crazy truth that everybody's voice is waiting for the right microphone.
yeah, it's totally true.
And once you get your microphone, like that's kind of like your microphone.
Yeah, I can be convinced. I would take another mic over it if something was better, but
keep it going.
Every time I talk in this, every time I just start singing into this microphone, I'm just like, oh man, this microphone just knows what to do with my voice, you know? And so I already had that mic, and I was like, well, I guess I could just record that vocal here. Like, I could re-record that vocal here and then get it to my my producer, my friend Andrew Atkins, produced that last single. And I'm like, I'm just going to cut it here and then send it to him. And I was like, okay, well, now this will give me the opportunity to figure out how I'm going to record vocals in this room. And there's this one corner where I'm facing into the corner. I'm about in the middle of the room, really, but I'm facing into the corner, and like the ceiling is like going down into the corner to about 3 feet. And then the other walls are meeting and it's going down straight. But up here, you've got that weird space where you basically have 3 walls all coming together at once, right?
Yeah.
And what you're trying to avoid, for anybody who doesn't understand what the fuck we're talking about, is you're trying to avoid lots of reflection. So by the way these 3 walls come together, basically my voice just goes into that corner and just stays there, essentially.
Yeah, vaporizes.
If I'm standing in the right spot and facing in the right direction, it just disappears. So when I'm singing on the mic, all you're really hearing is my voice going into the mic. You're not hearing a whole lot of the room around me kind of sound, which is exactly what you want. So it turns out that it's, in some ways so far, it's like, man, this is kind of like there's a little bit of magic in that space right now.
Yeah.
I'm very pleased to find out, especially because just, even if a lot of the recording I did up there was me just finding the tempo, putting together a little beat, putting some vocals and guitar on something, and then taking it to a situation where me and other musicians could all work from there and go for it and build it into something bigger. Even if I was just doing that, it would be rad if when I did that, I came in with a vocal track that just made it through the whole production, and we never bothered re-recording it because I sang the hell out of it and recorded the hell out of it. That would be great. And it'd be wonderful if I could just do that at home anytime I felt like it.
I can't tell you how many times in my producing times and mixing records times when just, and everybody's experienced this, like when you see people are just kind of married to the scratch vocal and all of the band tracks that get added, so for anybody that doesn't know this, like essentially when you're recording, you record the band essentially first in some way or another. The vocalist typically is going to save their actual vocal take for sort of after all the music's put more together, so they can place their voice maybe a little bit better.
But a lot of times at the beginning of all this, they've recorded some kind of a vocal, which we're calling a scratch vocal, because they're going to get rid of it later. But in the meantime, the band
placeholder.
The band needs to hear the vocal so they can time what they're doing.
Yeah. So the thing I was going to try to illuminate is basically this weird phenomena that happens, right, where all of the music gets sort of built around that scratch vocal, and then when you get in to actually start printing, recording down the primary actual vocals, something just feels inherently disconnected, even if it's performed very similarly or whatever by the singer, which usually it is. It's not usually wildly different. It's just more, dare I say, accurate or whatever. And then it's the weirdest thing where all of a sudden now the vocal just feels like it's separate and sitting atop a song, when you were trying to get like when you pull a band apart to record it, you wanted to put it back together where it kind of feels live. And if you can't do it live outright,
right.
So it's just strange that so often I feel like the vocal just ends up in this kind of separate headspace universe of the sound image, and then that all the other music is sort of categorically over here. And I think there's if you think about like how a guitar player plays to the nuances of the harmonics of a voice, or the things that sort of inspire, like the way that they're tying tones and frequencies together, when you replace one or the other, they're just not going to line up in the same perception kind of way. And it makes it feel like it has it feels like less like a moment in time and more like a construction sort of immediately.
Yeah. And I love one of my favorite things about like all this, just geeking out about all this idiot stuff is the whole idea of the sound image. And so for people who don't understand, like when when you have headphones on and you can hear a certain amount of stuff in the left side and a certain amount of stuff in the right side, if you haven't been doing this, or you probably have done this as a listener, you close your eyes and you really feel like, the piano is over here, but the flute is also over here, but it's back further, it's quieter, it's in the distance in some way. And then over here, the bass is like right in front of me, like it's punching me like right in the chest, but then the drum is like in the distance over there, and like right in the middle, there's the vocal, and it's like sort of got its own space in the middle and all stuff. And like, that's like the whole idea of the sound image. That's like when you're mixing a record stuff, that's what you're trying to do. It's like populating your canvas with this balanced group of elements so that it all fits together in one picture, but at the same time, on some level, each individual thing, you could kind of focus on that little tambourine over there and really hear it.
Yeah.
So this is actually, you want to talk about like, getting obsessive about things. I mean, you're obsessing about your studio desk so that you can then obsess over these dumb mixes you're going to make. Again, you're just like, I just got a little bit more of that shaker. Don't.
Well, yeah, I find too that I think a lot of people in their practices of whatever it is they're doing right now are tending towards things of some sort of purity. And I mean that in the sense that it could just be of message or the medium or the process or something. I feel like that there's this tendency or response right now that's happening where people are trying to get more to these essential truths or more singular in focus, maybe, because things are just kind of compressed and intense right now, obviously. And the way that's playing out for me, at least, is like just really putting a lot of attention on the practice itself. Because a lot of times you're just kind of doing, and when you're overwhelmed with a lot of different things, you're just like, when I just have time, I'm just going to pick that up and do this part of what I need to do for this project. And it becomes more of like an assembly line as opposed to like this sort of experiential thing that you're using as an iteration to grow and progress from or whatever. And so for me, like with my setup, it's kind of like I took what I'm using half a room to do and essentially whittled it down to a couple of things on a sort of a table in front of me, and like that's it. And I think also when you do that, you just realize how much more mastery that you need. There's an endless life pursuit in front of you in each one of these tools. You know what I mean? So don't feel like you've got such a handle on it that you can start having all this. It's like if you start playing drums and you get a 20-piece drum kit, it's like, okay, slow down.
Yeah.
Like maybe just get like a regular 4 or 5-piece drum kit and just play that, like, because you just started playing drums, right?
Right.
So I've been sort of like, there's always that ebb and flow, but of like, I'm really into the idea of things being separate from the computer and very immensely powerful hardware, like that is certain and central to like the neurology of everything I'm creating is happening in these, whatever I can put my hands on right here and right in front of me. And it's not about the recording or the Ableton or the whatever tool. I don't use Ableton, but other tools like that. So I have all my stuff set up to where it's like old school. I'm tracking multi-track to a box.
What's the last time that you were using any kind of a DAW?
Oh, well, I use a DAW all the time, but I guess what I'm saying is like when I'm recording, so I guess I'm saying like I use a DAW for more mixing as opposed to.
Okay. And what are you using on that?
So I use what's called Harrison Mix Bus.
Oh, okay.
And a real quick note on that for any people that have stuck through this podcast this far. Harrison's a kind of a cool storage company that's based out of Nashville that made these legendary consoles that sort of define the sound of a lot of things that people really appreciate and love. And a lot of very popular musics have been made, and, a very romanticized company in many ways with their mixed bus architecture, Harrison consoles. And what they did is they sort of made a pretty intense emulation, I suppose, of all that. Cool. But it's not just in terms of sound, but it's also in terms of approach. And what they do best is provide an interface that is a knob per function type of interface. So you're not doing a lot of drilling and menus and things. Everything's just like fader, knobs, EQs. Like it's very much a console, tactile as much as possible sort of experience. And so I really like it in the sound and like the EQ and the compression and you got compression on every channel, and in the channel strip, it's like, it's beautiful, man. It's like, it just feels like you're working on an SSL or like a cool console, like a really amazing console all the time. Harrison in this case, but so I love it. But what I don't want to do is record straight into it, like whatever. If I'm using drum machines or synthesizers or whatever it is that I'm using, I don't want to record those things into the computer. I want to record them into some other multi-channel box that I have sort of a mixer on and everything. And I'm still getting full separation of all the tracks, but it's essentially going to digital memory at that point, and then I can move it over and then put it on.
When you move it over, you've got individual tracks that you're mixing in that audio.
Yeah, so I very consciously have, because all the tools, it's like, this is a little bit of a. Sorry, I gotta say this. So tools right now, like the last 25 years of digital audio, it's always been about like how. Pro Tools, it can now do this, and you can do sequencing, and you can do composing and arranging and sound editing and effects and and now you can import these virtual instruments and have these running, and you can do this, and the tendency of all these softwares and tools is to become like the sort of the one fits all as much as possible. But what happens is they're really good at like 50% of what the tool is, and the other 50% is like garbage kind of just thrown in. It's not really thought about, and you have to really get in there to sort it out, and you have to figure out how you're going to use these tools. But ultimately, I like the idea of coming back to this idea of I use very specific things for very specific purposes at very specific stages in my workflow or process, and really knowing what those things are, as opposed to just like, I'm working on music, therefore I'm in Ableton and I'm recording and I'm editing and I'm processing. And I'm like, I've done that for so many decades now, basically, that like, I want to go back to what it was like when I was recording to a cassette, or whatever, and just feel like, man, I got that one, like I need some feeling of, especially because I make very different music than you make in terms of, electronic stuff, but it's still very performative and stuff. Dub sort of happens, stuff happens, magic happens, weird tones blend, sort of weird moments happen that I know when these things sort of glisten or sort of materialize. And so I like the idea of capturing them more offline and being like, okay, that happened and it was sort of recorded. And then I can move it in and be in a totally different mindset now of like, now I'm going to reconcile with sort of like, how do I just enhance or improve upon what this already kind of is in a linear editing kind of way. What kills me is doing long, linear editing projects, while at the same time really digging into the effects and really digging into the, like, I don't know. I just want to,
Yeah.
so I don't know. And because you start to forget, am I in the pre-production or the post-production? You know what I mean?
That's really interesting because I think, I mean, I think you've done a good job of sort of informing people how the people who don't know how this works. I think you've given them enough information for them to kind of understand that dilemma. But it's definitely, it's, first of all, it's for sure the truth that even people who love doing things analog, people who wouldn't think of ever recording to anything but tape, even those people, I guarantee you, when it's time to mix the album, they go digital, because that's where the digital stuff really does shine, is in your ability to mix. That's to edit and to mix. That's where the digital space is like really at its best. So I think that, that it's what you're doing makes total sense to me. At the same time, it's interesting because when you are in the mode where you're recording all your stuff digitally, inevitably you're also mixing all your stuff digitally, and you're mixing stuff. I mean, arguably, as soon as you start recording, you also begin mixing, because it's all right there and you can do it all right now.
Yep.
So as you're evolving it, you're actually just sort of constantly mixing the song as more elements are added and stuff. And it's also a thing too, where to me, that the mixing part of it becomes sort of the dominant part of it in a way. And it's weird because music used to be more like a, when people say that the late 80s, okay, which is like the last time before, everything really all went digital, right? Which really gets rolling in the 90s. So in the late 80s, let's say, you recorded to tape, and then you edited and mixed and all that stuff. After you did that, you tracked first, right? So you recorded everything you needed to record. You overdubbed any additional recording you need to do. Then you editing and mixing happens, and mastering, and then there's your record. And I think that back then, the whole philosophy, just like it was at the earliest days of recording music, the whole idea was trying to essentially capture a performance. You know what I mean? That was sort of the idea. We're going to capture a performance on tape, and then we're going to do this. And then when you evolve, obviously, and when you get into, post Beatles music, you start to think of the studio as more of as a toolkit for making art out of, and it gets a little bit more sculptural and plastic and all this stuff. And that's a whole other discussion. But generally speaking, still, you're talking about capturing stuff in the studio that you're then presenting. And there's a kind of an idea that you're somehow, there's fidelity between the thing you did in the studio and the thing that people hear on the outside world. And I think one of the biggest differences that we've come up with in the digital world is that the whole thing has become much more like movie making, in that it's way more production. In a movie, Al Pacino says the same line 8 different times in 8 different ways to 8 different cameras in 8 different moments. And that's the morning, lunchtime, and then bring Mr. Pacino back for the afternoon because we got to shoot the gun scene or whatever, and it's like, well, then what happens? Why does he shoot the same thing 8 times and it takes all morning? It's like, well, so then the director can go in there and he'll have all this material to pick and choose from to actually create the movie. The movie's not being created really when you're shooting it. That's all just to give you the stuff you need to make the movie later. After you get everything you need, now you and your editors are going to build the movie. And there's 12 different movies you could build out of this stuff. And that's where it's really going to happen. You know what I mean? And music's become a lot more that way in the advent of digital recording, for sure. In some really good ways, though, even the writing process is like bleeding into recording in a way, because the ability to edit, it changes the way that you go in with a song that's done, and then it's like, well, but what if we did this? And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, let me change that. Let me change this. So the whole thing just becomes sort of dominated by mixing, you know what I mean? And by post-production. It's much more like that. And has, even I think, for the most elemental person who's just doing their first recording, it's like their whole mindset isn't, this better be good. Their whole mindset is, I mean, if anything, it's unfortunately too far the other direction, which is sort of like, it doesn't matter, we can fix it. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's the bad temptation of that time, is like to have the discipline when you're tracking to really know that it's like, no, I sang the hell out of that. I played the hell out of that. Like, we're not going into this process with a bunch of garbage that we have to fix, because you never really can. You really have to, you got to get it right when you're tracking, but it can be really easy to think, oh, we'll fix it later, because there is so much you can actually do.
Well, like it's impossible to win though, because like here's the thing, like I'm sure pick any
podcast episode 111, impossible to win.
Embracing futility.
Give up now.
yeah, always give up. Yeah, no, but I guess what I'm saying is that you have to, again, in the same way that I was talking about doing sort of hard, quick iterations of work on a daily or some sort of fast-paced basis, and then sort of not beating yourself up. It's kind of like being on a diet and giving yourself a cheat day, whatever. Those things you can't psychologically beat yourself up about. You also can't beat yourself up about. It is the nature of the work that no matter what, like Joe, I know you can pick any song that you've ever recorded in your life that you've considered truly finished or done, right? In terms of like it went through the real process, not a demo or whatever. Every single song that you've ever recorded, if you put it on and you listen to it, you will hear at least one, if not more than one, moment or flaw or idiosyncratic, just something you tried to talk yourself out of feeling weird about during the process, or you just missed it entirely and you just didn't have the wisdom that you have now, or whatever it is. But you look back on that previous work and you're just like, man, like, you appreciate it, you like it, you feel good about it, you don't beat yourself up about it, but there's always that one thing. I mean, for me, it's like even down to just like that hi-hat is just too tenny, or that's just how did I, like, you know what I mean? Like certain obvious things that, like, this has been through countless measures of scrutiny. How am I here right now hearing what I'm hearing and being irritated by it?
Yeah, no, it's insane that you do that. There was one on my, I guess my third album has a song on it where I literally added the accent of like wood blocks, right? So I really love percussion and I love rhythm, and
sounds like you should have just gone with cowbell.
All these little things. No, the wood blocks were a fine idea, but for some reason, I remember that it was my fault, essentially, like that at some point on a later date, and it was a long time after it had come out, at some point on a later date, I was listening to it again and I was just like, God damn, those wood blocks are loud as hell. And I'm like, well, why are they so loud? And I'm like, they're so loud because I insisted that they needed to be that loud. and that was insane. And then when that record, I basically switched, my digital distributors a little while ago. And when you do that, all your music will disappear from every platform and you have to start over again and put it back up on another platform. Well, it just so happened that it was an anniversary of the record. So I got together with my engineer and we said, hey, do we have extra stuff we could add to this? There's a new version of the album anyway that's available now everywhere. And this album called Blue Turns Black. And and this has been for a few years now. It's been available everywhere again with extra stuff. And when we did that, I was like, we got to go back and turn down those wood blocks. so it gave me a second too to go back.
It's like the one thing.
Yeah, we went back into the original recordings. For the most part, we really gave ourselves license to fix anything we wanted to. And for the most part, man, we didn't really touch a whole lot of stuff, but there were a few things, and I was really grateful to have the opportunity to sort of revisit it and be like, okay, now it sounds even better. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of our, I mean, obviously the idea of remastering and remixing and re-releasing your albums, it's a way, that, you just get to sell your albums over again. And there's something to that.
But you're not supposed to open up the tracks again, Joe.
Yeah. But when you
broke the seal.
But many people do that. Many people do that. Come on. They took all the Phil Spector out of Let It Be, for God's sakes. You can do anything you want.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you basically can't win, and it's a fruitless cause. You're always going to have something you're beating yourself up about, or something that annoys you.
You have to at some point you have to stop. You know what I mean? And
that's right. And most importantly, two things. One is be careful about the stuff that 10 years later you think is now garbage, because in 20 years, it might just be hitting the sweetest spot imaginable in terms of how it relates to where you are then, or what's going on at that time, or how it relates to other
Yeah.
things. Like I've got
You
stuff
know,
that I go back to that's very crude or simple or basic, or not nearly as sort of experience, not coming. I wasn't nearly as experienced then, or whatever. And some of that stuff has like a purity that, you know, 10,
good
10
point.
years ago I listened to it, I'm like, God, this is just, what was I doing?
Mhm.
And then now I listen to it and I'm like, God, man, I was free, man.
Yeah.
Like I was just like,
Yeah.
I did not, there was no friction between me and creating, I
Yeah.
just was. And so
Totally. Yeah.
that's part about youth, right? But I think that it'd be ignorant to think that that doesn't also happen. Say, like, you and I are in our, like, what, you're late 40s. Are
I'm 50,
you?
turn 50 this year.
Yeah, right. 50 this year. And, so you got to think that, like, in 20 years, then, right, you're going to look back to what you were making now and you're like, man, like, all right, but in 10 years from now, you might be like, God, I hated what I was doing in 2020. Like, that was just, that's
I feel,
garbage.
all in all, I have to say, we're closing in on the end of 2020, and hopefully we're closing in on the end of a lot of the chaos that came with it. And I, all in all, I have to say that I feel mostly very good about, like, how my wife and I and my friends and I, and many of the people we've talked to on this show and have been in touch with, and have, sort of gotten through this whole thing with. I really think, I think a lot of people, have made a lot of good choices and have found ways to grow and continue and be creative and be strong and be healthy and be smart and
Lucky.
all that stuff around this time. And it certainly hasn't been easy. I mean, I haven't made every good choice, but I've made mostly good choices. And
Look,
I'm
man, look, there's
feeling good
always,
about
look, you're going to be able to you're going to be able to get a hot tub. Just relax, man.
it.
You just got into the house. Okay.
Yeah. So I feel like we're I don't know. I really do hope that continues. But I think too, I think that's what I was listening to a guy on YouTube the other day, just a guy that I listened to, and he was talking about all this different craziness about what's going on this year. And then at the end of it all, though, he summed it up by saying that, his whole plan was just to be cautiously optimistic going forward, even though there's lots of things to be worried about or scared about or whatever. And I was like, that's actually, I just needed to sort of be reminded of that. But I really do think that's something we've talked about, and I think that's something that is, also, important, is that it's like, there's things you can be doing right now to make sure that, as we're able to get back out into the world again and connected with each other again, that, you're better off than you were, at the beginning of 2020, that you're more raring to go, that you've got more resources under your feet or whatever. Our friend Andres Bustamante and I have been recently in touch. Andres was a guest on our show, in one of the earlier episodes. And he's a painter and a sculptor here in Nashville, and he had a tough time. I mean, he was like, basically having to find a new place to live because his landlord was being a jerk about rent and all this kind of stuff. And he went through some real challenges, through this whole time that I didn't have to go through. But he's doing great. He's really got his whole situation together. Maybe he'd be a good guy to have on again soon to talk about all the stuff. But I've talked to lots of people recently who've had many more challenges than I did, and even those folks have found, the best way to stay
Mm-hmm.
positive and actually make progress and find new opportunities. And it's also an effect that I have to say, I really do think that, when you surround yourself with artists and people like that, it's like, hey man, our whole thing is always about figuring out the angle and learning how to make a little do a lot. And when these challenging kinds of times come up, it's sort of like the hustle everybody else has to get switched into is something
Mm-hmm.
that that we're doing it all the time anyway, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's I don't know, it's been ultimately, I feel like, these are challenges that you can either live up to or not. And for the most part, I feel like those albums I've recorded, Brian. I'm looking back on 2020. I'm saying,
Mm.
hey, pretty good. Remember to turn down the wood blocks.
Yeah, well, so as we're wrapping this up, I want to sort of throw a few plugs out there that are kind of relevant. So our friend Andy Alexander, who lives in Olympia, Washington, he's he's been on the road with Tycho and Beck and Kanye and done all these various things, and but a lot Cut Copy, all these other big musical acts. He does all the Ableton playback engineer stuff. He's off the road now. He started a mastering kind of a post-production studio. And really, we were just talking today, and it's really about like there's so many musicians and people that have like come off the road or have had the ability now to sort of finally dig back into music and used to make a lot of music and are sort of back into it. And they have a lot of work, but they just need somebody to sort of help them kind of finalize and compile what's good here, what's not good, and then kind of produce them in a way or consult to sort of get to this body of work. And then he will also master it and make it sound amazing and kind of return it to you for a fee. And it's such a really timely, cool thing for exactly these kinds of people. So look up badandymastering.com and you'll find all the info there. And he's just got a cool story. He's done a lot of neat things. He's one of my dearest old friends. So obviously I'm just shamelessly plugging him. But if you've got music that you've made that you kind of just don't, you want to, it could be things of the past, it could be demos, it could be whatever. But if you've got stuff that means something to you, your old band, archives, whatever it is, he's the guy to get that stuff to. So everybody should consider that. Otherwise, we're just going to go week to week. I think we can wrap up here by teasing a little bit of maybe what we're hoping for next week. And then I found and maybe we'll get I'm sorry, I also meant to say that we'll get Tom on hopefully at some point. Life is weird and it's not a big deal.
Like I said, I mean, he's been very responsive to messages. I think it's these things go south sometimes in the middle of all this craziness. And I don't really think, I think we should just wait and let's just wait, because I don't know if there's if it's even worth talking about that article before I at least talk to the woman who wrote it. There's a woman who wrote an article that's very interesting. It ties together dojo culture with serial killing. So
sign me up.
So with that in mind, hopefully we'll be talking to the author of this article.
I mean, hopefully she'll be telling us that that's actually a podcast that she's going to do.
Yeah, exactly. She's going to be like, I already sold the rights to that article.
Because that's an amazing
Thanks, guys.
That's wild. But
it could be good. But in the meantime too, if people are hearing this on Friday and you're in Nashville, or even if you're out of Nashville, the Salt Weekly is a zine here in town. And 8 months ago, they were talking about creating a mutual aid society for artists here in town. And they raised some money. Actually, Andres Bustamante, I think, was one of the people who got some of the money from that original fund. And, the fact that he's rocking and rolling and really in many ways is better off than before he started, where he was at the beginning of the lockdowns and everything. It goes to show you how, an organization like this that can offer an artist $200, $300, $400, $500 is something that might not seem like a lot, but it can really go a long way when people are in between, different, challenges and opportunities in the middle of a pandemic after a tornado, like we are here in Nashville. So, so with that in mind, they wanted to have a benefit. It took them all this time to get to a time when, they've been able to work it out. So right now at the Salt Weekly, TheSaltWeekly on Instagram, you can find an auction that's up right now. I've got 2 pieces in the auction. It's all 2D work, I think, but a whole variety of stuff: prints, paintings, drawings, all sorts of stuff. Actually, there's some textile sculpture in there. There's a whole variety of stuff. Andres has a sculpture in the show, so go check that out. But you can go to their Instagram page at The Salt Weekly on Instagram, and then you can scroll through all the images, and under the images, it tells you what the starting bid for each piece is, and you can see if people have bid in the comments. and then you can bid in the comments too. And so obviously as the bids increase, the price goes up, and the highest bidder this weekend will be the person who actually gets the piece, I believe. If you're in Nashville, there will actually be an real life display of the show at Red Arrow on Saturday from 6 to 9, and you can go there and bid as well. And I think maybe at 9 o'clock on Saturday night, that'll be the end of it. Either you've bid online or you were at the actual exhibition and bid. And then they'll be, contacting people, to either come pick up the pieces, or I think if you were out of town and you bought a piece, I'm sure they would figure out some way to get it to you. It might cost you a little shipping or something, but anyway,
Awesome.
So if you're interested in supporting artists, especially if you're in Nashville and you want to support the creative community that's already here, all of the money will be going to these funds to help artists who will be applying for that after the first of the year, I believe, is when the next call will go out to see who needs funds. None of the money goes to SALT. None of the money goes to the Red Arrow. None of the money will go to me. If you buy my piece, thank you very much. I'd love to see a picture of it in your house, but the money will go to these other artists who need it. And the rest of us are just, we're volunteering work. This, Red Arrow is volunteering space. It's a great anarchist tradition for mutual aid. Don't count on the government, who can't seem to get a realistic, stimulus check together again for anybody. Don't count on this economy that it regularly screws people over to meet their quarterly earnings. Rely on each other, help each other out, support your community. You got an extra $50, spend it, get some great art.
Man, Joe Nolan, mighty Joe Nolan, bringing it right now. Hey, so real quick, I mean, if anybody has any questions about the strange latitude of this podcast, we meant to have a bare knuckle fighting championship fighter on today,
as one does.
And so instead we talked music and creativity and process and went down some wormholes for you, but hopefully it was of some entertainment value, or at least
next week we might do this again, or we might talk about women's karate and Ted Bundy.
That's true. So we bring the focus. That's what we have. So, all right. I appreciate it. I think we're good to sign out. Joe, you good?
Yeah. Thank you guys for listening another week. If you have any more questions about studio monitors, please let us know.
Send Joe
I'm going to buy these monitors. I found a really good deal on them. I'll talk to you about it in the green room.
All right, man. I'll see you in a minute. All right. Take care, everybody. We appreciate it.
Bye.